Steve, we've got the industry challenges session now.
Yes, if you can bring the slides on to the things that are troubling the industry extremely. I'd like to ask John Garfel from the Institute of Licensing to come down, and Steve Gerlich from the GMB Union to join us as panelists on the stage. We're man or person down at the moment because Greg Mendoza was due to be here today to speak. And unfortunately, he hasn't run out of fuel. That's a very likely subject and topic for us, but actually he's had the beep from the isolation on the COVID, and also Gary from Driver Tax was due to be speaking today on a couple of things that are close to our hearts, and he has actually got COVID. So the two gentlemen here are all fit and well. And I'll just look at the PowerPoint from where I'm sitting here and go through some of these things. Driver shortages, and I think John's got a couple of questions to ask about driver shortages, haven't you, John?
Certainly have. So how are you finding that driver shortages are being managed? Are people having to work longer hours? Are they having to work harder, dig deeper, just to get through?
And is there enough? What are the numbers like, John? Perhaps you could...
I've absolutely no idea how the numbers are, my friend. I know they're down.
Well, from the audience, how many of you have got 50% of the drivers that you need? Or more?
I think they're all doing HGV.
Sorry, if we could speak through the microphone. Yeah, if we could speak through the microphone rather than just rock up.
So let's put our hands in the air. Who's got enough drivers? Put your hands up if you've got enough drivers for your business right now. Who needs to recruit right now and can't find candidates? Okay, so that's about half, I would say, are having difficulties finding the right people.
Well, it's probably more than half because the operators would have put their hands up. What I would say is our assessment is that there is 25% of the drivers in the trade at the moment that were here 2 years ago. I wrote to Grant Shapps as Secretary of State last July to warn that last September, when we expected the pandemic to end, would be a catastrophic shortage of drivers. Everything that's happening, I'm really a bit sick of hearing about not enough petrol tankers because our industry is in a far, far, far worse position. And driver shortages and the barriers to entry, and that's why we're trying to work with licensing authorities, the revenue and other people to say, we need some help. We actually do need to get recruitment processes fit for purpose, and some of the things are up on the slide. So I think, is everybody, are we right in saying we've roughly got 25% of the drivers? Can we have a show of hands that we really need at the moment? Is that roughly the case? Or is that too high? Please put a show of hands up if you think it's 25% drivers that we've got at the moment. Nobody's sort of doing. Sorry? No, 75% shortfall is what I'm saying. Is it worse?
From my personal perception,
Better.
I'm about 25% down during the week. Weekends about 30% down.
Okay, so there's a shortage of drivers. I'm getting a massive, great big report of the shortage of drivers. We need to ensure that the processes that go through. Just going through the problems that are causing these things. Licensing delays. My phone rings most of the time saying we can't get booked in for a license, we can't get in touch with the licensing authority, I've got a waiting list of drivers. Those drivers are now leaving and getting other jobs because they can't be licensed, and there is a critical shortage on that. Is anybody happy about getting their drivers licensed quickly? Does that need to improve? And those are the sort of questions we need to ask. We've also got issues coming up with medicals, and I'll bring in the team in a minute. Doctors are not actually, the BMA are telling doctors not to license taxi, or not to do medicals for taxi and private hire drivers. It's not a priority. And there are agencies out there that deliver DVLA Group 2 licenses, medical, for the HGV industry. They do it for the buses and for other forms of transport. But there seems to be, you must see your doctor, you must see the full medical records, and we need to work very much on that. The English language requirements, they varied from ridiculous to, are you breathing, can you speak? It really is a massive, great big thing. Training we're seeing, some of the training, and that's why I'm pleased TfL are taking a pragmatic view on the safeguarding. You have to go on an all-day course with a pass or fail, and if you don't pass, you're out of work. We've also got issues, a couple of other issues with tinted windows. We're having drivers have their vehicles stopped or told to get different tinted windows in. This is a big problem. Plate exemptions. Chauffeurs are being asked to put plates on the back of the vehicles when it's not being required, and we need to get these systems in place. So, I don't know if any of my panellists want to have a word as well about these shortages, but we have got, I think we're all agreed that we've got a critical shortage of drivers, and this is the biggest issue that's facing our industry right now. Steve?
I have a hypothesis, but it's not going to be one you like. Two things I will say. Some of what Steve has said is absolutely accurate. I'm dealing with a driver who's bought a stock vehicle in a particular licensing authority at the moment, and equivalent vehicles that were bought just months earlier are able to go on the road, and he's now discovered the same vehicle that he's bought from a dealer is inappropriate because of the tint level on the rear windows. Now, that wasn't his fault. They said, did you read the instructions on our site? Well, he has, and he's presumed that because he's got precisely the same vehicle as everyone else with the same level of tint, his vehicle was acceptable. This is going to cost him thousands of pounds to fix, because you can't just go and de-tint a window. You have to get the correct glass, and factories tint at one level. So it's having to employ specialist processes of getting commercial version of the vehicle and getting it retinted. It's not an easy process. However, when it comes to some of the standards within the country, you have a hodgepodge, and we need some conformity. We need some regularity that makes sense. So if people are looking for work, they know what the rules are when they move across authorities. There is another problem though, and it is the elephant in the room. Whether you like it or not, drivers want to see pounds on the table. And the gentleman at the back is absolutely right. When it comes to HGV, I represent HGV, LGV drivers. Yesterday, I got a 17.6% pay increase for Yodel LGV1 drivers, which is a temporary fix until we do our pay negotiations next year. Plus bonuses that drivers are getting to come on certain shifts. And if they do a 6 shift, they're doubling their money. So you can imagine £34.40 an hour to actually drive an HGV on double money. Of course people are going to gravitate towards that, but it's going to take a while to get them on the road as well.
Steve, does that mean that fares will go up? Because the logic is if
Yes.
getting private hire is more difficult, that's a commodity that people will have to pay for.
The market has been suppressed for years. It has been artificially suppressed to put the consumer ahead of the driver. And the driver is the person who not only does the job, but actually promotes the company. And the psychology sometimes fails from that perspective, forgetting that the best tool you have is a good driver. Yeah. And people march with their feet if the money isn't good enough. Yeah.
I'll just come in and make a point, because on the potential solutions, and I know Greg Mendoza wanted to bring this up, is fare increases. Now, we all know why fares have gone through the floor, don't we? The disruptors. It's not the industry that's put the fares through the floor, it's the disruptors. And they've done giving away trips and what have you. Now, ironically, they're charging obscene prices for jobs. So one of the potential solutions that Greg was going to put forward was actually the price needs to go up. I mean, I can't believe, I haven't been an operator for 20 odd years, and people are still out there charging fares less than I was charging 20 years ago. Are we in agreement that we need to get fares up across the board? I mean, we can't form a cartel here today, but we've got to seriously think about getting a price that sits less than the disruptors, because you're actually getting taxi companies saying, actually, we're getting business now because some private hire is dearer than our taxi rates. Some people are saying we're so desperate for drivers, we're trying to get the metered fares upped. There does need to be a resetting in the industry of fare increases. Can I have a show of hands to see if people are in agreement with the need to actually get more money into the driver's pocket and ultimately, please? I mean, that's pretty across the board. Anybody think that we should keep fares at the current level? No? Ken Dodd's accountant
Steve, can I
isn't here
just
today.
say something? I once met a driver at Heathrow. I won't talk about the town that he came from. He said, you know what, we're the cheapest in this town. And I said, and that's a good thing? How do you think making it cheaper and you not being able to do any more jobs than the firm next door who you're competing with actually makes it better for you?
Okay, well, there's a couple of other things. So fare increases are a necessity. Insurance, tests, all the other things that we're needing to do. I'd just like to bring John Garforth in, because we've been working with Transport for Greater Manchester, and I regularly go on his Zoom calls with Oldham. And actually, they've done a consultation and they've come up with some very pragmatic stuff, including factory tints as tinted windows. Now, we know the DFT have got best practice guidance. This nonsense of getting a factory-built vehicle that actually reduces the air conditioning costs, that gives greater comfort to passengers on the basis that it's somehow dangerous to have a factory tint is ridiculous. There's a DFT standard for glass and it needs to be cutting across the board. And I'm very pleased to say that at Transport for Greater Manchester, they've taken some very pragmatic steps. And it is meetings like this, and it is dialogue with the trade, and it's hearing loud and clear the problems from the trade that leads to the solutions. But there's a lot of work to do. John, would you like to have a quick word for us, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I think in my 17 years as a licensing manager in Greater Manchester, never have I seen a time where the regulator and the industry are working so close together and actually both approaching the government with similar scenarios for change, which is really positive. I can remember many moons ago it was clash versus clash. It's not working like that now. We had a lengthy piece of work we're just concluding now on licensing standards for the 10 councils in Greater Manchester, and Steve was heavily involved in assisting us in that, as were other people in the room today. But I think the importance of what's coming out from that is that we have listened to the trade. We have made concessions, we have delayed things, we have decided, for example, we were going to put one of the conversations we were having about private hire vehicle colour was that it would have a regulated colour for all 15,000 private hire vehicles. We've now put that back and said that's not something we're going to be considering at this point. And that's because the voice of the trade was heard. Manufacturers' tints, it's really expensive, as Steve said, to buy a nice brand new vehicle for your comfort, for the comfort and enjoyment of your passengers, only to find out that through no fault of yours, the tint is wrong, even though it was at manufacturer, wasn't done separately afterwards. So again, it's about listening to what the trade is saying. We're never going to agree on everything. We don't always, but at least we have that common respect and knowledge share, which is really important. I have drivers say to me, well, you can't drive a taxi. I said, no, I can't, but I'm an experienced regulator. And as part of doing that, one of the big things is listening. And you gain a lot from the trade, no matter how you might get bad press sometimes for things that you get bad press for all the things that go wrong. You don't get the press always when it's deserved for things when they start to go right and the good news stories. So I want to try and turn that tide, and by working with the trade and the likes of Steve, who's been helping us on our project, we can make things improve. We know, for example, that there have been, Steve touched on the delays with licence applications across the country. And the body I represent as Vice Chairman of the Institute of Licensing, who's here today, we've been saying to our members, you've got to open up. You've got to be able to offer that service to licence holders and to people who want to come back into the trade. We know we've got councils out there who have got excuse me, very good systems, online systems, and some who very quickly, through the COVID pandemic, have had to drag themselves into the 21st century of technology, from paper applications and everything being done a very old system way. But I think that tide is turning, but we're still hearing examples of poor practice, which we're trying to encourage our members to embrace and get back on track with. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks very much, John. They really have listened at TFGM with regard to the standards across TFGM. Of course, there are things that we will be talking further on, and that will happen. But they have generally come up with some very sensible and pragmatic things. Now, just to move on to another thing, and I will come back to Steve Gaelic on English language requirements, because I know that there's a lot of inconsistency on that with the B1 test, the B something or other test. And down the slide, we've been an advocate of national standards, not minimum standards, absolute national standards in areas like English language testing, like the medical testing. It's ridiculous that still on one side of the road you can get one level and you can't work in another licensing authority the same day with the same qualification. It is mad. There's a number of things that could be nationally put forward, and we're hoping that government's best practice will start to move towards that in the absence of any regulation. Moving away from the regulatory side, there's also some opportunities, and a lot of these people are here today. We'll be very quick because we're running out of time, to discuss technological innovations between companies. Companies have to work more smartly together and collaboratively, and there are a number of stands around here today with initiatives for you to do so, particularly from the tech companies. Some of them are factoring in the safeguarding, some of them are factoring in the conditionality and what have you. You've got to use technology more smartly, you've got to work together more closely. Otherwise, the big bad wolf will eat you up and take you away, and we all know who I'm talking about. There does need to be some technological collaboration. I think I'm running out of time almost. Was there any quick questions? One question, one or two questions? Ash, you've had a question. Somebody else, please. The gentleman
there we go. Gentleman in the middle. Come on, Alan. Running shoes on. So there's a gentleman just here in the jacket with his hand in the air. Quick squirt, if you pardon the expression.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. When more emphasis is going to be put on bus lanes being able to use by minicab drivers, since bus lanes are actually illegal in this country? I've got document dating back a few years ago when government lost its case in European Court of Justice because we're paying road tax here from the usage from one curve to another. Without being given a discount, this right is taken away from us illegally. And this is judgment when government was taken to court, and I've got a letter from the government when I was due to pay fine, stopping in a bus lane, dropping off blind lady to helping her across to her flats.
It's a brilliant question.
And never paid the fine. Fine was waived. Hundreds of thousands of pounds was refunded then, saying in that letter, to drivers who's been fined similarly. Why so little emphasis, since 6 or 7 years ago it happens, being put on that? This is the only city in the whole country where minicab drivers can't use the bus lanes.
Okay,
which is actually illegal.
If I could come back to it and just finish on bus lanes, because somebody that's not here today, there was the chairman of Addison Lee, actually spent a third of £1 million congesting bus lanes on behalf of the industry and lost the case. They did. No, he didn't. No, he lost the case. And there's a couple of things you've said that are not accurate. Unfortunately, the bus lanes are devolved to the licensing authorities. TfL have got a policy on it. It was challenged with a lot of money. The challenge actually failed. If you go to Scotland, you'll see, I think there's bus lanes allowed in Glasgow, but not allowed in Edinburgh.
That's true.
And it's all over the place. It's absolutely not correct to say that we're allowed bus lanes everywhere else in the country. So sorry, it's not, you're not saying what's factually accurate. We would want to be in the bus lanes. We've campaigned to be in the bus lanes, but it really is not the biggest priority we have right now. If you get into a bus lane and you get a ticket, you should appeal it, and you should get your trade union or your trade association to help you to sort that out, because we've done that on many, many occasions. If you're dropping a blind person down, you should have the right to appeal that ticket and have it rescinded. So that's really taken me to the end of the session.
We're getting signs from over there.
Sorry.
Is there hand
John.
waving? Right, it's time. You've earned it. It's time for lunch. So we're going to go for lunch. We're going to finish lunch and serving food at 2 o'clock, and we're back in here for 2:30. Okay? So enjoy your lunch, enjoy the networking, visit the stands all around, because there's lots of stuff out there for you to see.